think of procurement, uh, it's not just simply buying or purchasing an equipment. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, especially in today's day and age when everything is very patient centric, and we have so much of information already available to us. Digital internet is actually making all this information available to us, not just globally, but domestic market is also quite visible. And as a country, we are a large market for any equipment manufacturer, you know. And if I understand correctly, we are the fourth largest market for medical devices in Asia. And but we have seen traditionally that we have been highly dependent on international products for whatever reasons, you know. And the government few years ago took the initiative of launching Make in India, and we also had the PLI scheme that was launched for the Indian manufacturers. But the scale at which it is growing is something that makes us believe that there's a lot more that needs to happen. And it's not just the government, it's not just the manufacturer, but the whole industry has to come in and create that acceptance for the products. Now, all these are great words, but we need to understand the perspective of what goes into deciding what equipment needs to be purchased, what technology needs to be brought in. And that is the reason that we are all gathering here today, because we have everybody from the ecosystem. We have the representation of the government from NITI Aayog. We have somebody who's buying equipment for diagnostic industry. We have somebody who's buying equipment for hospital industry, and influencers like doctors who are the actual users of the equipment, not just for diagnostics, but also for surgery, etc. And we have somebody from the Indian manufacturing industry so that we can understand their perspective. The objective is to come up with a holistic approach towards what needs to happen. So I was, first of all, on behalf of Business World, like to thank each one of you. You are all very, very busy people. I don't need to say that. But despite your busy schedules, you have taken the time out to be with us, sitting in this room today. Some of our colleagues have actually flown down from different cities to be here. So gratitude to you for making time to participate in this conversation. Just for, I know each one of you knows each other, but for the benefit of the recording, I would like to introduce, let me begin with the ladies. We have Dr. Urvashi Prasad. She's a director. She's trained in public health in UK, and she came back, took this learning and her passion for public health, and she joined the government. And she's right now currently working as a director in the office of the vice chairperson at NITI Aayog. We have Dr. Upasana Arora, who's the managing director of Yashoda Super Speciality Hospitals. Dr. Ashok Seth, chairman of Fortis Escorts Heart Institute. We have Dr. Harsh Mahajan, who's the founder and chief radiologist at Mahajan Diagnostics. Mr. Sojwal Vora, who's the chief supply chain officer at Manipal Hospitals. Mr. Sunil Khurana, the MD and CEO of BPL Medical Technologies. And we'll soon be joined by Mr. Madan Sampath, who's the chief supply chain officer at the HCG hospitals. He's landed, he's on his way, should be here in another 15-20 minutes and joining us. So thank you all for joining in today. If you allow me, let me just deep dive into questions so that we can make the best use of our time. And my first question is to you, because you're the most pertinent person when it comes to purchase of equipment from the hospital perspectives, Mr. Sojwal Vora and Dr. Upasana. Mr. Sojwal Vora, how can you help us navigate through the different aspects of what usually you consider while planning for procurement activities at Manipal hospitals?
First of all, thanks a lot for having me here. It's also a pleasure to be meeting all of you as well and sharing the stage with you here. I'll bring in a perspective, obviously from the industry as well as from Manipal, but also what I have been in. I've been in procurement purchasing for a long time now, so I'll try to bring in those elements as well. So first and foremost, I think is we should buy what the clinicians need. If we are a procurement organization, it can't be that we look at only the purchase price, or we are the corporate office. We want to, we are sitting in an ivory tower. That doesn't work. So we really have to buy what the clinicians want. That's number one priority. And the second one that happens obviously is then, and it works very well, if the clinicians give us a few options to choose from, these are my specifications, which are reasonably broad specifications, which don't really point towards one single, brand or product or a model. That becomes important. So that's an understanding between the clinicians and the administrators. So once that happens, and then obviously then once you have a scope of what needs to be there in the purchase, then you actually get the choice or to leverage multiple players and get in what is really best for the organization in terms of cost, in terms of quality, in terms of how your procurement strategy should be, in terms of share of business between various stakeholders that are there, various suppliers that are there, and making sure in the end what the clinician really wants, because you don't really want to buy a machine which doesn't get used just because it's different from what was really desired in the first place. So that's what I would say.
Dr. Upasana, is the process similar at your hospital, or is it something that you do differently?
Everybody knows me in the industry as a patient safety officer, I should call myself. My passion is for patient safety. That is why today I am here sitting with dignitaries. So first I always think, like when I have changed my X-ray, everything, that X-ray was perfectly fine and it was from GE. So it was a very good and new X-ray. But then Fuji, just came to me and they told me that their X-ray can detect TB in very early stage. So just to keep my patient in my mind, we are purchasing equipment. Like I have changed my CT, which was also working very good and properly. But then we are doing TAVI in our hospital, and that machine is having some software which can be very helpful to the doctors. So that is how we purchase equipment, to keep patients in mind. And then we always involve all my clinicians who are end users. They have to be happy with the equipment. That is the mantra.
Lovely, lovely. Dr. Seth, as Mr. Sojwal Vora mentioned that the input of the doctors is really important. You're at a point where you are a doctor yourself and you are also heading the institution. How important is the doctor's perspective, and what does a doctor keep in mind when he influences a decision or takes a decision to purchase a certain equipment?
Thank you. Firstly, of course, it's a pleasure to be amongst some of the finest people in the healthcare industry out here. And I don't like to call it industry. I always like to call it the providers, various aspects of providers out here. And we're all aiming for the same thing, patient benefit, the patient outcomes. I'll just put a different perspective to it, because I have and wear many hats, though I would like to be known totally as a clinician, but I am a policymaker and I administer, and I've created institutions, hospitals, luckily never owned them, which has been always a nice thing. The important aspect is that I look at a thing slightly differently to what pure procurement is all about. I do agree that at the end of the procurement, or start of the procurement, is actually the clinician who's got to give that care. But there are three aspects to procurement which I look at, and I've created the policies around that and encouraged Fortis Healthcare. Just to give you an idea of how Fortis Healthcare started functioning is that clinical governance, mainly because of IH, has become a very important focus. And clinical governance itself is an integral part of decision-making processes around all this. So it doesn't no more come with administrators, it actually comes with the governance structure, which means I had the Fortis Healthcare Medical Council, under it comes the specialty councils. But we divide things into two parts clearly. One is the consumable items, drip sets, this, that, needles, syringes, etc. I don't think any clinician's got to be totally involved into how to procure that, which company. There are two aspects which is clearly with the procurement officer, and that is assess the quality and the quality certification around whatever you got to do, go for the cheapest price certainly, and have internal audits around them, because we are never sure of quality assurances and quality control within our own country, with the numerous on these consumables as to the numerous production of consumables which is happening, which is a great thing about Make in India. But unless we audit 500 syringes, and for every syringe, new syringe that we bought from a new manufacturer, we don't have an audit of those 500 first use as to how much function, how many failed, how much actually leaked, then we won't have that. That same goes for stopcocks, that same goes for any of the, any aspect of whatever we consider as large bulk consumables. Because then only we come to standardization, and which clinician would ever go into kitne stopcocks and kitne syringes or kitne drip sets mein kaun sa acha hai. But there are implants which actually make the difference. These are ones which are really making a difference to the patient, his lives, his outcomes, and those are very clearly goes from the clinician backwards. But the standardization across the whole healthcare organization has to occur. That's the most cost-effective way of providing. And therefore the standardization comes through our specialty councils. For example, we have a stent. Now we want to standardize stents across the whole of Fortis Healthcare. We say there will be consider two top-end stents, consider two made in India stents, consider X, Y, Z. And we give this to the Specialty Council, and the Specialty Council has leadership representative of across multiple Fortis healthcare hospitals, 21 cardiologists in that. And they actually presented this. I, for a moment, as a cardiologist, can decide which should be the pool, and then they select out of that and say, this is what is going to be cost-effective, value-based for my patient. What if the quality issues are so complex in such circumstances, and we haven't really established great quality matrix in this country, because the first step has been increase manufacturing, increase affordability, increase availability, increase the fact that we have this available in our country for our patients. And the second part has to come in, has to be robust quality matrices which we'll have to follow. But to do that, at the moment, our best quality matrix for implants, by the way, is the clinician himself. Because the clinician always believes, do to your patient what you do to yourself. Implant is something which goes into the patient. And therefore, with all the rigorous data from across the world, including India, including stents, or any other device which is manufactured in India and abroad, at least the clinician is the best person to decide what is best for his patient and what he's most comfortable with. So at the moment, we have that as a quality matrix, and then we go downstream and say, this is what we do to standardize it, and that's how the procurement happens for implants and for electronic devices.
Really, great that you have a pool of doctors who present everything, they make the choice, and then there is a standardization that happens across the hospitals. Great. Dr. Mahajan, the beginning of the use of equipment in healthcare begins with diagnosis, right? How do you consider the procurement process for your imaging labs, and how is it different from what a typical hospital does?
I think overall there's not much of a difference in the procurement process. Ultimately, you have to fulfill a need that exists. In a hospital, just as in a diagnostic center, and we are present in hospitals as well, running departments, apart from having standalone centers, basically it depends on the type of hospital it is. Is it a very large hospital, 500 plus beds, 1000 plus beds? Is it a 200, 300 bed hospital? Is it in a metro? Is it in a tier 2, tier 3 town? What are the applications that most of the clinicians require out of a certain equipment, be it a MRI, be it a CT, be it a cath lab? In the metros, probably, especially since there is drainage from the surrounding geographical areas, you would need to have the highest or nearly the highest end equipment in your hospital. Then if you're a specialty hospital, you may be still 150 beds, 200 beds, but like a Escorts Heart Institute, which is doing all and everything that is required in cardiology or cardiac surgery, even if it's a smaller hospital, you would want the best because you are a tertiary or a quaternary care hospital. Similar is the case, say, if I were to set up in Delhi, a standalone diagnostic center, or in a Meerut, or maybe Kanpur. So, and even though all the machines are called MRI, you can get a MRI for a 5 crores, or 10 crores, or even for 18 crores. All of them do nearly the same job. But there would be certain applications which you may not be able to do on those that are lower end. Not to say that the lower end are going to miss something. Ultimately, I believe the equipment is important, but the man behind the machine is equally important. What someone may squeeze from a medium level equipment, someone who's not as good may not be able to get. So the machine has its own capabilities, but the capabilities of the person behind the machine are equally important. Now, having said this, these, especially in the radiology field, and I'll come to the lab and the pathology segment later, these are highly capital intensive, very expensive machines. And technology keeps changing, keeps advancing. Sometimes, we as buyers of equipment actually feel, what has happened? I bought this machine 1 year ago and now you've got something else coming in. So another very important part is the upgrade path that a manufacturer provides. And this is also a philosophy which individual companies have. There are those who will provide you always a modular upgrade path. So something new comes 2 years down the line, you are able to spend some percentage of money as compared to a new equipment and bring it up to the present state of art, and you'll be surprised. This can continue even for 10 years, 15 years, where today some of the machines that we have bought 10 years ago are at the same level of capability as those that you are able to buy today. And so a modular upgrade path is also very, very important. Then the third thing and the most important thing, you may buy the best machine, but if it breaks down and there's no one to repair it, then what are you going to do, especially in a healthcare environment? So service backup, stability of the company. You may have a company come in, sell products very cheap, even though they may be very good quality and not have a good service backup. You're not going to buy those equipments. On the lab side, it is by and large, you enter into a reagent contract with a company. Luckily, the good companies are 3 or 4. Most of them, whether on the imaging side or on the pathology lab side, they are all give or take 5 or 10%. Someone is good in one thing and someone else in the other. So there again, it would be, once you've assessed the quality and shortlisted 3 or 4, as my co-panelists have said earlier, then cost becomes a major factor. And in the cost, it's the lifetime cost. So you take into consideration the service contract, which may vary from, for an MRI from 25 lakhs to 1 crore. So you have to also consider that and look at the total lifetime cost than just the purchase price. So all of these things are important, but ultimately the equipment you buy has to suit the needs of your patients, of your doctors, and of the disease that exists in your geographical area.
You actually brought out a very important aspect, which is also a confusion in the minds of somebody who's taking this call, because the equipment has to suit the area, the geographic area, the kind of cases that you're getting. the size of the opportunity. I choose to use the word opportunity because when we look at from the perspective of the institution, it has to be, we have a responsibility to not just bring in the best equipment, but also to make it sustainable business, which is where the cost also comes in. And then the cost is not just of the equipment purchase, but also related to the service that is available, as well as the upgrade that needs to be there. Thank you so much for summing it up so beautifully, sir. Dr. Seth, when we are looking at buying equipment, I understand there's a committee that sits and there's a lot of objectivity which is looked at too. But even the buyer is a human being, and we have our own mindsets, perceptions, and confidence levels. And it is kind of reflecting in the numbers where 80 to 85% of the equipment is still being imported. Do you think that we are still biased in our mind towards foreign equipment when it comes to our confidence on that? And also, in today's day and age, when we are looking at internet and all information available, is it also a mindset of the patient when he knows that, ये तो foreign equipment है, अच्छा equipment, world का best equipment use कर रहे हैं, because that's what everybody very casually speaks about, that we've got the world's best equipment available in our hospital. So what is your thought on this?
Well, this is a very, very important question. I think we got to address this and get the elephant out of this room clearly. But before that, I just had a couple of points around what was said around the table as things occurred to me. And one was certainly for Fortis Healthcare, we've decided that procurement's not going to come out of an administrator. The procurement actually comes out of a whole vertical called MSOG, which is Medical Services and Operation Group, which has mostly doctors who've turned administrators and were clinicians clearly till a few years ago. It's a good way. I'm not saying it's not the only way, but I think it's a good way to actually integrate the thought processes of the end user clinician into somebody who's used it before anyway and is now into administration and procurement, and therefore understands the nuances around the numerous plus points which are listed down when a high-end equipment comes. And every time a new high-end equipment comes, the numerous plus points are so many that you clearly start thinking last year's equipment's probably outdated because there's so many plus points are there with this new equipment. Having said that, I think your question is very pertinent, and I look at it in two aspects. You said high-end devices, Medtech is truly 80% imported at this time. While there are many of us tertiary hospitals have to, for the sake of this country standing across the world, deliver the best form of care which is available in the best centers of the world. And therefore, if you go to equate that and put India on the map, then we certainly have to have the highest end equipment to service, because that's what some people in our country would need. But that doesn't mean that's the equipment which has to go into tier 2 cities, into tier 3 cities. For that, we need healthcare equity in a huge way. And just because we buy extreme high-end equipments and do those techniques and technologies which cannot be really going downstream, what does a public need? What does a nation need? Our nation needs, on one end, these high-end hospitals, but also it actually needs healthcare equity in a manner where similar devices can actually go downstream through R&D in this country itself to create technologies, to create high, medium-end equipment, providing intermediate care services, but value-based services, quality-driven services. So when we come to, we keep on discussing that we're going to go downstream, and yes, we are addressing affordability, we are addressing accessibility, we're saying availability, and we say, okay, agar hum Hindustan mein itni cath labs, we get cath labs at 50 lakhs perhaps, more and more cities, smaller cities could have accessibility to an angioplasty for a heart attack or any of these, life-saving treatments. But on the other hand, are we going to be able to provide the same quality is becoming an issue for me, which is the next step in delivering of healthcare equity is going to be healthcare quality. Equity in terms of quality. There's no reason why a routine angioplasty, which I do at Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, should be done with any different quality, with a poorer quality of stent, with a poorer quality of precision at, say, a very small tier 2 cities. Wahan bhi cath lab khuli hui hai, and there is still being done. But at what quality are they doing it? Is their patient coming back with a heart attack? Is their patient getting readmitted after 2 months? And unless we start looking at value-based procurement and value-based delivery for this country would be the next step. I'm saying unless we start looking at that, that's not the issue. That's going to be the next step. So great steps and great moves of promoting indigenous manufacturing, because that addresses availability, that addresses accessibility. Amazing insurance schemes by our present policymakers and government, which has covered huge population. And as we see, I'm sure that in 2 or 3 years, we're actually going to have a greater focus on quality. Now, then it brings me to the point you asked. Why is it that we are enamored by the West? And I say it for a simple thing like stents versus the numerous Indian stents which are being manufactured. I think India does a great job. Firstly, let's just understand that. The greatest minds in science, technology, engineering, manufacturing are all here. And even if you actually see the West, all those biomedical engineers are all from Indian IITs and our colleges out here. The issue is that we have to get our quality systems much more robust. And that, I think, is the biggest issue. For example, we're taking a drug, or for example, we just take, and I keep saying the stents because it's the commonest used device and an implant into everybody. And it's actually the most commonest manufactured device in this country. If you look at that, for a stent to be in the market in a West is firstly, if it's got to be FDA approved, has to go through rigorous, blinded, prospective, randomized studies, which are not just one. By the time it's actually being used, it's gone through at least 10 different forms of studies. But for a stent to come into the Indian market, it just requires 100 patient safety data, 100 implants, and a registry is enough. That's not totally fair. It might be the greatest stent, and by the way, I've actually been the principal investigator for all Indian stents for their approval in this country. So I'm therefore able to not just say that for every stent manufactured in India, they're good, but I'm also able to say for the transcatheter heart valve, which I started in this country 12 years ago, the Indian valve, of which I was the principal investigator for its approval in India, is a great innovation which has now overtaken the West because of its efficacy, because of its safety. It's in 60 countries, as is becoming one of the most commonly used devices in Europe. But how is it happening is what we got to analyze. It's happening because there are some companies who actually looked at the opportunity and said, not just do we have an opportunity in India, we have an opportunity worldwide. And if we have an opportunity worldwide, we're going to do randomized, prospective, double-blind trials which make us viable and credible in the West. And that is why they've taken over. So the transcatheter heart valve produced in India, researched in India, developed in India, is, by the way, sold from American companies here for 20 lakhs or 22 lakhs, gets now here at 12 lakhs for an Indian consumer, and then it goes to the West and is now going to 2 major randomized trials because it becomes automatic choice for those value-based procurement agencies which the whole Europe has. Europe relies on value-based procurements. They want to know the outcomes. They want no readmissions. For them, it's not just the patient going out of the hospital, which is a success, and they pay for it. The payers are very clear. The patient cannot come back in the next 2 months. They will not pay for that in the next 2 months. He's got to stay fine for the next year. Give us the data for that, for the whole year, and don't just say it works just because we made it. Now, that is what our stent companies have done, randomized trials and are becoming the stent of choice in Europe. The reason for that is, again, they saw the market as a huge. But if they only saw India as a market, they wouldn't have to do those studies, by the way. They were automatically approved. They were automatically available. They were automatically being used on only 100 patient data, which was surprising. And that is where it hurts me. So how do we differentiate a good stent for those 3 or 4 companies who've done these large randomized trials and proven themselves, the Indian companies? There are at least 20 other manufacturers whose stents I don't even hear of, I haven't known till I see somebody else in this country having used it. And then I look at myself and say, would I have really put this stent into any of my relatives, into my father, into my brother? And if I can't confidently say that I would have put that stent into my brother and my father, then I don't think it has got the data and the confidence. If I pick up a stent, and it doesn't have to be American, it doesn't have to be Indian, I just have to say, Has it got robust quality control? Has it got robust scientific data and randomized trials? Has it stood the scrutiny of all peers to say this is one of the most safest and effective and devices based on patient long-term outcomes? And if that long-term outcome is suffice, then I would say that there should be trust on it. So it's no more, in my mind, बाहर का है कि हिंदुस्तान का है. We got to change that mindset. हिंदुस्तान की चीज़ें बहुत अच्छी हैं. Let's take them forward on a more scientific and rigorous basis, and let's be the player for the world and not just player for India. That is my message.
If I may just add, Dr. Ashok, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just about the quantity that you talked about, the trials, it's also about how long have these devices been in the human body and what is the feedback. So even if you have a fantastic device that's produced, if you're a new company, and if you don't have data for 3 years or 5 years, I think there are norms around it. So without that also you can't really go ahead and start using, because it can't be that it works very well for the first 2-3 years, right?
And I've done the studies with all the Indian stents. The first human studies have been done by me. So I know that they're good. We just don't have the scientific rigor around it.
Yeah. Right.
Harbinder.
Yes.
I think what Dr. Seth said really, is the most important thing. Would I put it for myself? Would I put it for my father or sister or brother? If the answer is yes, then, it's passed all my tests. And that can only come through a rigorous double-blind trial and long-term follow-up, which if not done, there's going to be no acceptability. If you remember 10, 15 years ago, Indian manufacturers would say, make in India for India. What has changed in the last 7-8 years is that now we say make in India for the world. And that really matters. And it doesn't everything, especially when we talk of large medical equipment. These are devices which go into the body. They have to be absolutely safe and efficacious. But when we talk of medical equipment like a CT or a MRI or a cath lab, there is Professor Ranjay Gulati at the Harvard Business School, and he coined this term, good enough quality. And that is good enough, really. It needn't be the best available. And if you look at the best centers of the world, they would have some equipments which are the best, and they would have some which are medium tier, and some maybe even so-called low tier, but they have to be good enough. And especially in a country like ours. And, Dr. Urvashi talked about Ayushman Bharat. If you look at the price point that the government expects, you have to use equipment which is basic. But that doesn't mean that you will compromise on safety or quality. It still has to be good enough. And I think that's what this country needs, while at the same time having the best that is available in the best institutions globally, being at that level also, and being above that average good enough quality. We do not want to be below that. And that's where the challenge in this country exists, because the best are being paid the same as those who are below the average line. And actually, there is really hardly any audit about quality, about deliverables, about what is the value that the patient got. And unless we do that, you would see that the best institutions are not there in the Ayushman Bharat, do not provide that care to Ayushman Bharat, because viability becomes an issue. Quality costs money. And I think we need to realize that just because it's the lowest, the most economically deprived in the country, doesn't mean they should not get good enough quality. They need that.
I think that's a very important point that you brought up, because it's not just about standardization that we speak about. It's a minimum standards that need to be maintained, which needs to be spoken of. Doctor,
just a brief sentence I would add. But that is only going to come in if the third party payers, be it the government, be it any agencies, be it insurance companies, start realizing that quality matters at the end of the day. stent is a great example where everything got equaled between good stents versus not so good stents versus bad stents. It's not to do with, again, foreign or Indian. It's just stents which have great science and data, which includes Indian stents, and stents which have no data. And they're all equal to the fact that sometimes I think stents may be getting manufactured in garages because the number of stents which have appeared, but surely not in garages, but they're coming from all over the place without any testing and yet being approved. And I think those are unfairness to the Indian population. So we have to be discerning around quality more and more as time goes on, and it's most important for the payers to start discerning it. Otherwise, it's only clinicians who are actually trying to discern it. The payers are not trying to discern that. In the West, it's the payers. In fact, quality and delivering value-based quality is totally dependent upon not just the healthcare providers and not just the clinicians, but also the payers and the patient. Every stakeholder has to be on the same page. That हम अगर दोबारा admit हो गए तो ये आपके implant की गलती थी. What you did was there was something wrong. It could have been actually done better. And if I didn't do so well at a year's time, there was something that missed out. And what was it that missed out? Was it your expertise? Was it your equipment? Was it your implant? What was it? But you just can't tell me that ये तो होता ही है.
Accountability plays a very important role, right? Dr. Upasana, I want to put the same question to you. You're a newer chain of hospitals, right? Buying a world-class equipment, does it mean buying foreign equipment?
So actually there are one thing more is happening in this industry, in our healthcare. That is, somebody who is coming to your place, you are supposed to tell him what you are using. Ventilator, which company, MRI, which company. There are something you want to buy, some Indian made thing, but you can't. Reason behind this, like these days, our Honorable Prime Minister is focusing more on medical value travel. So we are attracting foreign patients. And to tell them, we are making our website very attractive with all equipments, pictures and all. So there has to be some, America-based, like GE or something like this. So you are supposed to do that, not you want to do this. But it is a need of ours that if you want to tell others, we are into this healthcare industry from last 32 years. And we are the one who started CT scan in UP, in Ghaziabad. So first neurosurgery we have done. But now things has changed. That time people were coming with the name of the doctor or hospital. Now everybody is coming with all the things, what you are using, like companies are coming to us now, we have introduced this 4D Eco. You have to have that and then you are branding yourself with that. So I don't want to use all the time foreign equipment, but when you talk and when you say it's a world-class technology, then you are supposed to keep those who are actually, proven their self in the world. So this is the reason why मेरा आत्मनिर्भर भारत वाला वो जो emotion है, that is for some time that is not there.
Mr. Khurana, I want to, we have all heard about PLI and all these are great terms, but I don't think any of us, and I'm taking the liberty to speak on behalf of everyone sitting here, understands PLI better than somebody who's affected and benefiting from it and somebody who's created the policies. So my next two questions are to you. Can you explain what a PLI is and what are the challenges that the Indian companies, Indian manufacturers are facing in India? And as a senior member of the industry, can you explain that, why are we still facing these challenges?
Good question. So PLI, in my view, is the one of the most welcome move, at least I have witnessed in my 4 decades of career. I mean, PLI shows that leaving many other segments, if medical devices has given the PLI, it is a production link incentive. So, just to exactly tell that if I produce a product and sell, from the base upward, whatever we do, we get 5% incentive given back to us. That's the PLI. Now, though I can just tell here, and since the regulator is here to just draw that attention, is that PLI today may not benefit to companies like us. If it doesn't benefit to company like us, it will not benefit to any Indian company because threshold has been kept very high. If today you are a 50 crore ECG machine, if limit is kept 60 crore rupees incremental, it will not happen. And then increment on that. So probably those changes are required to be done. But PLI is a big commitment of Government of India, that's what I say. Coming back to the challenge still is that you don't have qualified R&Ds being produced by the institutes. So you have to have, you have to have a R&D to draw from the whiteboard to a product, then get regulatory approved, and then only it will go to the market. So that's a one long cycle of it. Second, you don't have a manufacturing team. Today, we hire people, go to institutes, take them, they have no understanding. Even biomed members who just go for a qualification, they probably don't have that detailed understanding which can help us to do the manufacturing. So that's another area. So these are the challenges which we see. The biggest challenge which I see in India is the electronics component, because I represent electronics medical equipment. And if I compare, let's take with China, it's not right to compare, but on the similar scale of population, let me compare. They started electronics manufacturing, components manufacturing nearly 20 years back or 25 years back. And they have brought the electronics component cost so low that today when I have to make a product, I get electronics component from the open market. I get it from the overseas, generally from the developed market. The cost of electronics component is very high. And when you make it here, then you really can't, it's very, very hard for you to go into that comparative mode. And that is where I've been always talking that we need to create some kind of entry barrier. The products which are very basics, I'm not talking of the high-end MRs or high-end, those machines, we should make an entry barrier in such a manner that we get compensated for what benefit somebody else has till India also starts manufacturing, which in my view will take at least 5 years time that you will start getting the electronics component in the market. So this is how I look at it. But coming to PLI, I believe it is a really, really a very welcome move. And I'm sure what challenges today we face will get corrected. When they say that so much of allocation is there and it is not being utilized, those changes will definitely happen.
I think I don't know about the challenges that he spoke about. I don't work in the manufacturing industry as he does, but I do see, as a customer of those companies. For example, I look at BPL. I see Philips is doing it, GE is doing it, Siemens is also using it. I think what these companies are very nicely and smartly doing is they already have large R&D facilities in the country. These are all global R&D centers, and you talked about R&D not to be made secondary, right? So all of the innovation that's coming in the country, the in-country, for-country development, that they want to start also manufacturing. These companies are actually using the PLI scheme as an opportunity to actually get these designs into a manufacturing mode and get these products out, So from that perspective, I think it's starting to work out well. Obviously not the big machines that I talked about earlier, but the smaller machines, the machines which are more relevant for the geography that we also talked about earlier in the conversation. So machines which are more let's say affordable for Indian, which don't have all the bells and whistles that are required from fancy machines, but which kind of are good enough to do the job. So those type of equipment are now being manufactured in the country by these large corporations using the PLI scheme. So that's an addition, I think, I thought.
Yeah, please, ma'am.
I would like to share one thought with you that nowadays, like we are talking about India-made things. So what is happening? There are groups of hospital owners and there are groups of different, like AHPI and all. So what is happening? We are discussing about those instruments, like he said, not very high end, but we are talking about autoclave, biosafety cabinet, which everybody is now preferring to take from India made. Still we are struggling for MRI, CT, but other things, I think most of the hospitals are taking Indian made. Same time, there is a very good thing when we are talking about quality of that product. Like I have 100 people in one group. So I am asking, this person came to me, what do you think? Are you using this? They will say yes or whatever. Then we are talking about rates also. So how much you have paid. So things are very good and going in a very right direction. So, it will be a win-win situation for both the parties, buyer and seller. Because seller will get a pool of orders together, as well as we will get very good prices. So I think it's a practice. Dr. Mahajan, you should also join that group. I will include you in that. So I think like me, I am trying to buy those things who are not into highlight. So though, like we are using Paramount bed, but same time if you see Janak is also making good beds. So we can switch over to those things. So we can promote our country as well as we are not compromising anywhere with patient safety. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. I think, I've always maintained that whatever limited knowledge that I gather because of speaking with all of you is that whenever we are doing anything related to healthcare, we are impacting one of the three things. One is either we are impacting the accessibility, which is extremely important for us as a nation because of our interiors. Second is quality of care that we are providing, whether it is highly technical when it comes to robotics or invasive equipment, or the equipment like you mentioned, which is helping us support the hospital or the care. And third is the affordability. So I think whatever we are doing is impacting either of the three things, and I think R&D is extremely important. This is a role that the government can it's a very important role that the government can play, because when we are looking at manufacturing equipment in India for the world, we need to match the standard, the standardization of acceptance of quality that is there. Now, typically, even when we spoke about this equipment that they produced for the world and they got FDA approvals, etc., should the government not be fighting or collaborating with the world so that the Indian standards get acceptance overseas? So we don't have to struggle to go and get approvals in other countries where we don't understand their working. So what is the role that government can play on this? And also, after you've spoken, Upasana ji, you've been on the G20 committee. This is a great opportunity for us to take up these issues and speak with all the participants from these countries to focus on that. First to you, Dr. Urvashi.
Yeah, I think definitely, and that sort of confidence, I think will also come, because that requires a certain amount of confidence to in our own sort of processes, the strengths of what we are doing. I think just it is important to note that when we are talking of our regulatory system, we have a lot of important challenges. One is the center state issue that plays out. The center state dynamic in pretty much anything that we implement, but more so in regulation, in terms of the strength of what we might do at the center vis-a-vis how it plays out at at the state level, and the capacity issues, the human resource, because I think any conversation is incomplete without talking about the human resource and the capacity issues. So I think that is also something that we're trying to focus on, because as is rightly saying that we started and we're still in that sort of transition where devices, drugs, everything is sort of one big category that we were looking at, right? We did not even have this differentiation. Then we took some baby steps. We started with the rules that came in. Now we've been working on the policy and also the bill. In fact, we've got a lot of feedback on the bill, so it's gone back for interministerial consultations now. And so I think again, that evolution that I was talking about, from looking at drugs completely in almost the same way as you're looking at devices, to now realizing that it's a very different ecosystem. We need a very nuanced approach. Even within medtech and devices, we're talking of so many different types of devices. For instance, we were having a discussion the other day, on the policy issues about the whole home healthcare space now, right? And so the kind of devices that you'll use there, the sort of more miniaturized almost devices, or monitoring devices. So the fact that even devices, there's no one big bucket that you're talking about here. It needs a very nuanced approach. And so even in the regulatory space, we need to build that capacity to be able to have regulation which can keep pace with this very diverse category that we are talking about in a way. So I think we're first trying to build in our own strengths, systems, confidence, and I think that's coming, and that's at least getting us to a level where we can have this conversation now at a global scale. So I think G20, as you mentioned, we would certainly be raising some of these issues there to say that we need this kind of acceptability, we need this kind of recognition. And you know, it doesn't have to be always defined by someone else. You know, what is that benchmark, you know, that we have to follow. So I think we're definitely going in that direction, but it's just that, you know, we have a lot that we need to do in terms of our indigenous, you know, capacity, our regulations, strengthening it. And so we want to make sure that we are, you know, focused on that, and we're working on that. So it's kind of working on both those tracks at this point in time. Yeah.
We've requested the government several times that they need to differentiate between a device, a small device, a syringe or a stent or an implant, and a huge capital equipment like a CT or a MRI or a linear accelerator or a cyclotron. They cannot all be bundled together, and the policy formulation cannot be uniform across the board for these. So I'm really glad that NITI Aayog is looking at this, and I'm sure the policy will change.
May I
Ma'am.
come in for
Yeah,
some
please.
time? Actually, this G20 is going to be a game changer for Indian image, because when I met few, because I am part of GW also and G20 healthcare also. So when I was meeting new people, and they have taken 5 minutes to tell how good we are, how beautiful country it is, how warm we are. They were very happy with our hospitality. And everyone, even I think that lady was from Germany, and she was talking about our this Ayurveda and yoga and thing. Ki after surgery, what we do, she was a neurosurgeon. We provide some meditation and some, she was presenting something. So this shows that everybody is actually fascinated with the Indian, now India has developed a lot, we must say. And as she was talking about, Dr. Urvashi, that device is a actually very big area. We need to, because pharma, everybody is appreciating Indian pharma industry. We are actually doing very good, especially in the time of Corona, we get this vaccine and all. So this time when all these people are here and all G20 countries, and they have invited more countries, they are calling it invited countries. So I think everybody will see that India is actually growing, and you can see whole Delhi is changed, every city has changed, and we are doing a really great job. So after some time, like now for medical tourists, everybody wants to come to India because they are getting different kind of, you know, not only medical, modern science, they are getting other things also. When we will be able to, all our brains are working in different countries like UK and America. Indians are the one who are running their healthcare and their software. So when our brains will work together, then nobody can stop us, and we are going to be Vishwaguru. And I think only 5 years are required when NITI Aayog is also ready to, you know, take more initiatives. And I think with you, like Business World, who is a big name, we can make a, you know, some committee, and we can go and visit our ministers and tell them that we are able to do so many things. Kindly give us some direction and some थोड़ी सी छूट भी होनी चाहिए and help. Not very strict all the time, na? So then things will move forward, and everybody will appreciate that Indian make is not bad. Indian make is as good as other foreign made things.
See, when Japan started manufacturing after the Second World War, it was looked down upon कि ये जापानी चीज़ है, ये तो खराब होएगी. Same with China. So it's an evolutionary process, and I think we've traveled quite a distance in this evolution, so that now we are taken very seriously in terms of quality.
No, I totally agree with you. And you know, there is one aspect that goes missing, and that is the reason I really wanted to bring this together, is because apart from, you know, you brought in that we have a role to play, because we can, you know, bring this up as a talking point with the government and all the stakeholders. But one thing that you very rightly pointed out, which we all as players in the ecosystem need to do, is to take pride in our equipment. Because technically, which is why I brought up that, you know, other than the objective thing, there's a subjective thing as well, the mindset. Because we need to take pride in our equipment. We need to take pride when we talk about our equipment to the world. G20 is a great opportunity for us to do that. And, you know, I think that is where the differentiator is going to be. Mr. Khurana, since we're talking about, you know, quality, over price. We are saying that, you know, we should be known for the quality that we offer than just the price, just because we are an Indian manufacturer. How can Indian companies be most preferred over foreign companies? What journey do they need to undergo, and when do you see that happening?
See, let me really give a respect to the multinationals, because they are there for decades doing something which we have started now. It is just a time. You have to give it time, and I believe probably a decade from now, this discussion will not be there. Like Dr. Mahajan said some time back, you know, when company is exporting, we started only 2 years back export, and today I am also present in 47 countries. But the cycle is so difficult that I go for a R&D, because in-house product. I'm taking a simple example of ECG. We took nearly 18-19 months to finally create a 12-channel ECG, which is very advanced, you know, HL7 compatible, this, that, everything. Now from there, going to CDSO, getting in 6 months time approval from there, and then I go for a MDR license for the CE, will take another 1 year. So product actually is out nearly 3.5 to 4 years time. So the companies who are young, like us, only 9 years, you will see probably down the line 5 years, a lot of product coming from here to go outside, and probably a decade down the line, this comparisons of multinational or foreign products to this will completely cease, is what I believe. Of course, market also has to be there. If you look at Dr. Mahajan took his first MRI, and probably that was the second machine in 1991. And you know, after that, only 3 or 4 machines used to come every year in the country. You know what is happening today? Today, MRIs are being sold nearly 400 units a year. And that also, we are still very small, because we are 1/10 of maybe China. If you look at the Japan, we are still about 1.5 beds per 1,000 population, and some of those countries have gone so much. So as the infrastructure is improving, you will see Indian medical device really doing very well, and more big companies will come. I would not be surprised. Tata's jumping into this, and Reliance jumping into this, and Mahindra is jumping into this, and you know, probably working closely with companies like us, and further make it big. So I'm pretty sure that gap of that will not exist.
I'll just want to add one thing, that while the rest of the world looks upon us for innovative solutions, which are less expensive and equally sound and effective, or perhaps even better quality, each time even the smallest of the countries around us, by the way, are far more robust at understanding quality, understanding value-based outcomes, and actually wanting quality data from us at every step, again and again, certification data from us. And that is really why any of the stents which have gone out from this country, any of these valves which have gone out from this country, have had to undergo large randomized trials in the West, so that they could show that they are not inferior and in far superior to what was available to them from the West itself, to be able to establish themselves. This is going to be a forte. Don't even think that we can just ship it to Malaysia maybe. Even their policies are far more robust on quality control and outcomes than we are. They're all third-party payers, and all third-party payers want value-based outcomes on paper in a very clear, randomized, acceptable, peer-reviewed manner. And therefore, we're going to actually have to strengthen this part of it if we really got to actually display our wares across the world.
What you said is absolutely hitting the nail. Let me tell you, if I want to take a product to Sri Lanka, it takes nearly 17-18 months for us to get the product trials and completion. Whereas during the difficult time, anybody, I mean, even I don't want to name now, anybody can bring an oxygen concentrator and start selling something where the outcome of oxygen was just 30-35%. And the worst was that since only Philips and BPL were the top names into oxygen concentrator, Philips is big company, so they didn't took that risk. But a lot of stickers were made as those companies also started putting BPL. We had to come to the media to say that this doesn't belong to us. So it's a very, now only regulatory norms are getting tightened. I think after September, or if that gets extended by a couple of months, we will not have any product brought in India unless that product is registered with them. So this is a change which is happening, sir, a welcome move in my view, and this is going to remove all those freelancers. This is definitely, otherwise I can go and bring 2 cartons of products from anywhere and start selling at any price. So that is just probably few months are there now for that. It'll all be over. So great point. Great point.
Leave your business and the government responsibilities to, participate in this very, very important conversation that needs to be taking place to make a better healthcare, opportunity for us as a nation. Thank you so much. And,